Everybody get in. Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll let you all connect and hopefully we'll see some faces waving back at us shortly. We didn't realise the time. We were all busy. Me, Bev, Ian and Colin were all busy chin wagging. So apologies for that. But yes, we got carried away talking about it. We've just had a sneak. Me and Bev have had a sneak preview of the slides as well, which has been quite nice. So you're in for a treat this afternoon is all I can say. So I'll let you all come in and then we'll just quickly crack on. For it. So let me just go and find my share screen. Here's me telling Ian to be prepared and I'm not myself. So anyway. So good afternoon, everyone. This is the after this talk today, it's the halfway point through the series on the online. So thank you very much if you are joining us for the third one, or thank you very much if you're joining us for the first or the second one that you've joined us with. So thank you very much for coming along regardless. So we do hope that you will enjoy today's talk. As I say, me and Bev have just had a quick sneak preview of Ian and Colin's slides, and you're in for a real treat. I will put my hands up and say I've never been to Coventry before. So I am, no, Bev was tutting at me already this morning. So when I told her that, so looking at these pictures now, though, I know I need to make a visit. So that might go on my 2024 to-do list of where to visit. So hopefully if you've not been to Coventry after this, you will be inspired to visit as well. But obviously we're here to talk about the regeneration of the town centres, and that's what you'll find out today, and about how Ian and Colin have worked in partnership, two different organisations working together for the benefit of the town centre in Coventry. So just to introduce you to the Heritage Trust Network, we are a membership organisation. We have reached over 800 members now across the UK, which is absolutely fantastic. So if you'd like to find out more about what we do, about how we network with organisations, building preservation trusts, community projects, funders, local authorities and whatnot, please get in touch to find out more about what we do and how it can benefit your organisation. As always, because we're on Zoom, a little bit of online etiquette. I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs, but please, obviously, if you can, please remain muted throughout. And if you've got any questions at all for Colin or Ian while they're presenting, please pop those in the chat box and we will talk those through at the end. But we will also unmute people as well. So don't feel that we're going to keep you muted for the entirety. We will ask you to unmute at the end if you want to have a bit of discussion with both of them. Obviously, we're happy for you to turn your camera off. We don't need to see you. We might ask you for a nice photo at the end with everybody. But as well, Bev is on board here as well, who most of you probably know. So if you have any technical issues throughout, you drop out because a signal and things just come straight back in. Bev is there to assist, to get you back in, to get you sorted if there are any issues at all. So Bev will be popping her details in the chat box in case you need to contact us just for any technical issues with Zoom. Now, some of you, I think, have joined us. I do see some familiar faces. You have joined us around the country as we've toured with this series. We've been to Wales, we've been to England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. So we've toured everywhere to talk to you guys about rethinking, reusing and regenerating, all to do with the town centres. We've had tours of buildings, of the regeneration zones. We've had some fascinating discussions, some absolutely brilliant speakers, and that is continuing now with this online talk series. So we hope you enjoy the third one, which is, as I say, today, working in partnership for heritage and public realm, place changing combination Coventry. So we hope you enjoy this case studies with us today. And it is all about how different organisations can work together to benefit the high streets and the town centres. So thank you very much for coming along today to talk. And our two speakers today are Ian and Colin. Both of them have some fascinating history behind themselves. You know, they certainly know what they're talking about today. Ian has been regenerating urban centres for over 40 years as a private developer, working in partnership with government and third sector organisations. So he's definitely got some experience in that. He's also running his own regeneration company. So if you ever need to talk to anybody, get in touch with Ian. And he is, along with others, he set up the historic Coventry Trust in 2011, which initially saved the Coventry's 14th century charter house. And with us is Colin from the Coventry City Council. Born and bred Coventry as well, Colin. So yeah, you've kind of worked your way around things, and we have got a fantastic talk today about how we've worked with how the council are working with the Historic Coventry Trust on how things are supporting the town centres. So thank you very much for booking these events. As I say, if you have not become a member, make sure you do. And as always, we'd like to thank players of the National Lottery who have helped to fund this, and also that's helped us to develop this event series. So I'm ready for Ian. Ian, are you ready to share your screen? Yeah.
Right. Brilliant.
You're right. All set. Fantastic.
Cool. Well, I'm going to immediately hand over to Colin, and just looking at those photographs, Colin and I are both Cov kids, and we are the same age. And looking at that photograph, I just have to say that obviously life in the public sector is a bit easier than the private one. About 10 years younger than me, Colin. But never mind. But I will shut up and hand straight over. So just give me a shout when you want to move the screens.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether to say thanks after that intro, but hello, everybody. Really pleased to be here and sort of talk about our sort of experiences in Coventry. Now, I have to say, for me, this is, my work in this area is quite unexpected in some senses. By background, I'm a civil engineer, probably not the profession most noted for its heritage credentials. But as Ian and Hannah have noted, we're both proud Cov kids. And consequently, it's been fantastic to be able to work on some really interesting projects. So if we move on to the next slide, what I'm going to do is just talk you through, which really what I think is just some of the tip of the iceberg, really, some of our more recent projects. There's been loads been going on prior to that as well. And it's really been a mission, certainly of mine over the last 14 years, to, do some transformative projects and, make the best of Coventry's assets. We have a unique city centre, not always to everyone's taste, but, we have some amazing assets, amazing buildings. And I'm really proud of the fact that, our sort of post-war, our modernist history is now being much better recognised and appreciated. Now, this was our shopping precinct, famously designed by Donald Gibson back in the 40s and 50s. Very much abused, as you can see in these pictures, by the planners back in the 80s and 90s. So, one of the things that we did when we knew that we were becoming the City of Culture, we made a successful bid for funding to transform the precincts. So if we go on to the next slide, you can see how we changed it. It's bringing much more greenery back into the middle, as was the original plan, bringing water. Again, there used to be water. Fountains very much part of Gibson's vision. We've gone back, we've looked at the railings and the lighting details, and where possible, we've sought to replicate at least the essence of those 1950s railings and lights, which you can see to best advantage on the balcony in the bottom left picture. The sort of photograph at the top with that sort of mosaic-y thing, that was something we discovered. It was an unexpected find when we were excavating to do the works. We uncovered a mosaic, which must have been the threshold to the White Lion Hotel, which stood in the former Smithford Street, which got bombed in the war. So having spotted that, of course, couldn't let that just be reburied or destroyed. So we very carefully rescued it, got some professional conservators in, and made it a feature in the new precinct. So I'm really pleased with that. And on the bottom right, you can see a work of art called the Naiad. And again, this was part of the 50s, 60s work in the city centre. A local artist called George Wagstaff crafted it for the city. It then went into store for many years, like many other of the city's 20th century artworks. And so we found a new home for the Naiad as a key feature in our sort of upper precinct water feature, which you can see there, again, to great effect. So you can see overall what a brilliant transformation, this was of the precincts. And unusually, I have to say, working for a council and particularly being involved in highways and transport, for once in my career, I don't think we had any detractors. Normally, you know, we get loads of people complaining, but I think there was almost pretty much universal acclaim for this, you know, that it absolutely transformed the precincts and brought back, you know, an essence of that sort of post-war architecture. So if we move on to Hertford Street, this really, the title of this is Repurpose, Regenerate, etc., Rescue. Well, I think you'd agree that's pretty drab. That was a 1970s creation when Hertford Street itself was pedestrianised. And this sort of canopy was thrown across, unloved, unmaintained for many years. So we commissioned a well-known London-based artist, Morag Meiskov. And if you move on to the next one, you can see how we transformed it. It's absolutely amazing what a lick of paint can do. And it turned what was a pretty moribund place into somewhere, you know, a bit more playful. The sort of the plastic screens, if you like, that go overhead have been sort of coloured. So when the sun shines, you know, you get all sorts of patterns on the ground. And generally, I think this is a great example, you know, how with a bit of creativity, working with the right people, you can make something out of, you know, the most ordinary. And then the next one, please. This is looking from Broadgate Square at Broadgate House, which is a Grade 2 listed building. It was one of the first buildings to be erected as part of post-war regeneration. But again, back in the early 70s, when Hertford Street itself was pedestrianised, the opportunity was taken to build that nationwide building society underneath the bridge. There used to be a restaurant above called the Bridge Restaurant, which became a bit of a misnomer with Nationwide. And so, again, we got the funding, worked with Nationwide, and worked to open up the arch. So if we go through to the next slide, you can see there on the right-hand side, looking through now from Hertford Street through into Broadgate with the arch reopened. We also, you'll notice some stone statues up above this sort of the arch. And again, you know, they were one of the post-war artworks which we have illuminated as part of our scheme to make them a feature. When Nationwide was there, they were basically hidden out of sight. So we've really brought back to life some of the features that were there. The other thing that we've been able to do is to create a really successful eating area there. A nice, you know, we put some benches around the trees and really made something of what previously was a hidden out of the way space. It's now a broad thoroughfare, which is part of the key route from the railway station connecting through to the city centre. So if we move on, please. Talking about the railway station, here you can see Coventry Station. Some of you may know famously, it was the prototype station on the modernisation of the West Coast Line in the late 50s, early 60s. It was the first station to be rebuilt as part of the modernisation and electrification of that line. And it's a Grade 2 listed structure. And, you know, it become quite drab and shabby over the years. It was built to cater for 2 million passengers. Nowadays, we have near 8 million people using the railway station every year. So something had to be done to massively expand it. And what we did, if we can move on to the next one, rather than try and rebuild the existing station, we actually built almost a new station alongside the old one. So the top left picture is looking from the new car park over the old station and the sort of the turning area that sort of links the both parts of the station together. The bottom left shows you the architecture of the new station. We wanted it to be complementary, but not a copy, or indeed to jar with the existing architecture. And unfortunately, you can't see the footbridge very clearly that we built over the railway, but in the top right, just beyond the road bridge, if you're very observant, you can just see the new bridge that was built. And that was built in a style deliberately to complement the horizontal lines of the existing architecture. So I think this is a very successful repurposing. It was an £82 million scheme, a very successful repurposing of an early 60s railway station, respecting existing architecture and creating a transport hub that's fit for the future. And the bottom right shows the new bus interchange. And interestingly, we're in discussions at the moment with a company who wants to operate autonomous taxis from there. So in line with Coventry's tradition of being innovative, the cut in front of transport technology, the motor car, the motorcycle, the push bike, you know, here we are again looking at opportunities to do that. So next we have the bus station. I won't say very much about this. Not a particularly beautiful 1980s edifice, it has to be said, but there it is as it was. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see how again a lick of paint has been able to transform that space and make it a much more usable space. And again, I think this is a great example of how, you know, pretty ordinary stuff can be, you know, reused and repurposed. You know, every detailed, looking at typefaces, color schemes, use of local artists, which we used here. What isn't pictured there, unfortunately, is a brilliant two-tone mosaic that we did, celebrating the two-tone movement, which of course had its origins in Coventry. And again, I think it's something, you know, we're really proud of, that for a relatively modest cost, we were able to turn something that was quite unloved into a place that's much more user-friendly and place now that, you know, it's worth visitors going to see because of some of the work of our local artists. And then if we move on, lighting. We spent quite a lot of time on lighting. We have a PFI street lighting contract with Balfour Beatty, and whilst I have to confess to not being the world's greatest PFI fan, Balfour's have been great to work with, and we've done a number of partnership schemes. And the top left one, you know, lighting Coventry's 3 iconic spires, making the most of that heritage. You know, I think you can see there, you know, again, that's quite transformative. Coventry, you know, is known to some as the city of the 3 spires, and that really sort of brings those 3 spires to light at night. But we didn't just light the spires, we've lit the fountains, we've lit the route from the railway station across Greyfriars Green, which is that bottom right, and we've lit a number of other assets as well and made great use of light throughout the city centre. It's not the most expensive item, and it's a way of, you know, again, making something ordinary extraordinary at night, and a place, you know, that's playful and can be really enjoyed. So if we move on, Coventry Cross. Now, that's the Coventry Cross before. The original Coventry Market Cross was knocked down, I think, around 1771. And in 1976, a local builder, I'm not quite sure why, but decided to commission a replica in concrete, except for the little statue things you can see there, which are in local sandstone. But essentially, it was pushed around the back, you know, the back of the main buildings in Broadgate, the town centre, and, you know, was not really a much revered feature. And so when it was in the way of a redevelopment, decision was taken to dismantle it, not destroy it. We dismantled it. Again, we got specialist firm in who took it down piece by piece, stored it. And then if we move to the next slide, long story short, and this was a long story, we have moved it to a more prominent position. And in actual fact, only yards away from where the original Coventry Cross had actually once stood. So in contextual terms, it's now in the right place. We cleaned it, rebuilt it. And what we did actually, and this doesn't depict it too clearly, but we opened up the lower panels and inside have put a replica of the statue of Henry VI, who was the monarch who granted the city a charter in 1451, made it a city and a county borough. So we decided that the Henry VI statue, which was the only surviving part of the original Coventry Cross, was too fragile actually to allow it to go back out into public display. So what we did was, as I say, we had a modern one made in a material called jesmondite, same size as the original statue, and then we've clad that in sort of stained glass, you know, toughened obviously, make sure that it's vandal proof, and it's lit at night. And again, you know, that's become a new feature for our city centre, but sort of extolling some of the history. And what some people may not know is that John Thornton, you know, the stained glass king, you know, famously windows at York Minster and whatever, was a Cov kid. He was just born about 200 yards away from there. So again, there's a really nice sort of connection between what we've done. And that is actually stood in a very historic part of the city, where the 20th century on the left actually meets the old medieval city on the right. So it's in a very prominent location. And if we move on to the next one, I'm not going to say too much about this. This is Palmer Lane. And Ian's going to talk, I know, a little bit more about that. This is about rediscovering Coventry's river, which is over the 20th century was culverted. And then we literally ended up with about 20 yards left at the back of a street called Burgess, which I know Ian will talk about. So Ian and my team and myself have been working very closely over the last 2 years, coming up with some great ideas about how to do it. Our struggle, of course, is funding. And I'm sure Ian might say a bit more about that. But I'm very confident that we're going to have a scheme there to implement. And as I say, I'll let him do that. And my final slide, you might think this is a slightly odd one, Coventry Ring Road. You may love it, you may hate it, but it is an absolute feature of our city. And when it celebrated its 40th birthday, 80% of Cov citizens said they loved it. So we felt, you know, no, we should do more, you know, to embrace it. We've cleaned it up. And the other thing we've now done, although the bottom is a sketch, it now does look quite like that, is we've been slowly working our way around. How can we break down the barrier that was presented by the road builders of the 60s and 70s and create more pedestrian, cycle-friendly space while still permitting the free circulation of traffic, as in the spirit of the original ring road? And I'm very pleased, you know, that 2 of the schemes that we've done, you know, have had great success, and, you know, really want to do more. But I do genuinely believe that, you know, taking sort of functional items like the ring road can also be made to work. And indeed, you know, the ring road is very much part, in my head, of the city's heritage, love it or hate it. You know, it's what people think of Coventry. I mean, us Cov kids love the fact that most visitors dread it because they find it quite scary and baffling. So I was just going to make a couple of other points before I hand over to Ian. I mean, and Ian will reinforce the point, but, you know, having someone like Ian to work with is great. You know, having people you can bounce ideas off and work closely with, I think it's you know, it really makes for excellent partnership working. And my team have supported Ian's team on some of the heritage projects he'll talk to you about, you know, with access and parking and those sorts of things. We're also employing a sort of global firm of respected architects to help us do a city visioning exercise looking ahead to 2045, 2050. And part of the remit is, how do we, you know, use Coventry's heritage? How do we use it to create a city of the future? You know, this isn't about looking back, but how do we take, in the words of our cabinet member, the best of the old and with the best of the new to create a city that's fit for the 21st century? Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, for that very much. A big thanks to Colin generally anyway. I mean, thank you, Colin, for actually being here today. I know you're on annual leave, but also I don't think anybody can say that what you have done in the city in the last 5 years has not been totally transformative. The whole city has changed, and I know, based in London most of the time, just bringing friends up to Coventry for the weekend, how stunned everybody is with the place. You know, it feels now, various people have said to me, Greek friends have said, it feels like a Scandinavian city. It feels like a place where you want to sit out. You know, it's animated, it's clean, it's nice. And realistically, you cannot regenerate a place without public realm. It's a key element of bringing people back and bringing places alive. So I'm now just going to go into a bit more detail on what we've been up to with the council, and to maybe, as most of our audience are presumably similar organisations to Historic Coventry Trust, to maybe sort of talk a bit about our experiences and what sort of pearls of wisdom or not I can give. And some of this may be sucking eggs for a lot of you, but you know, for those sort of starting on the route, it's important to say that you know, cities are incredibly complicated places. I so often go through life just listening to people saying, why doesn't somebody do that? Or why isn't this done? There are a very small number of council officers. There is a very limited amount of funds, and it's just getting worse all the time. And really, to get things done, you should stop whinging about it and actually get off your backside and start doing things. And you know, the reaction you get from your partners by you actually doing something is like sharing responsibility. It's important also to realize that you know, cities are people. And it's all about people. It's not about buildings at the end of the day. And people have different relationships, and some people may be getting on at some particular time, and some people may not be. And as a heritage development trust, really, you have to sit in the middle, and really, you've got to work with everybody you possibly can in your place, because you need all of their support and all of their complementary investment. At the end of the day, the council, and it's not just Colin, it's all of the senior officers that we work with, but particularly the cabinet members. If you haven't got your key councillors behind you, you're never going to get very far in a city like Coventry and in most places. The council is, in Coventry, the freeholder of much of the land and a lot of the buildings in the city centre. It has a controlling hand on just about anything. And it also has the potential to work in partnership, to bring in government fundings to help these projects happen, and in pairing your project with council investment in other buildings and public realm, and then also private investment by other owners and developers, you can start to have a much bigger regenerative effect than you would on just doing your scheme in isolation. I'll pick up on this a bit later, actually, but there is a I've been to many heritage conferences where the evil developers are talked about. There are evil developers, there are evil owners, and I'm sure there are evil council officers. But the vast majority of people that you come across are actually nice people and want to make an improvement. Some may be more generous in opening their pockets than others, but generally there are a lot of people out there with a lot of expertise that you probably don't have, that you could be working with. And importantly, in selling the case for your own funding applications, the outputs and match that come from that other private investment is great to justify your requests for grant. So at the end of the day, if you're asking for an 80% grant for £1 million project, but somebody else is actually doing a £10 million project down the road that's connected to what you're doing, it makes the case much stronger. There are also a lot more stakeholders, excuse me. And in Coventry, we built a close partnership with the Business Improvement District Company that also supports the council's teams in street cleansing, but does a huge amount of work with local businesses to both support them and improve the public realm. We also have two universities, with Coventry University based in the city centre. They're hugely powerful, and have a huge influence on the city with the amount of staff and the amount of students that they have. And they are also a firm partner in us making anything happen. And you know, finally, but no means least on this, is the involvement of our civic society that we work very closely with, both in terms of coming up with ideas, coming up with support, and other local charities. And we tend to think a bit in a box as a sector, but there are so many other people that can be doing complementary things. You know, the town and city centres are the focus for the whole community, and that gives huge advantages to working across sectors. And you know, finally, within that, clearly, relationship with funders is key, particularly as time goes on. The more reputational benefits you can build from having completed projects makes the conversations a lot easier. And I'm actually finding that they are a lot more receptive and flexible these days. They've been The funders we've had have been incredibly flexible in the way we want to deal with things. Their understanding of the challenges of cost increases we've had recently, their understanding of time constraints and political pressures. So engage very closely with your funders. So, clearly those relationships are built in a day. A lot of our schemes that we're working on are things that have been on the table for about 20 years. So be patient and ride the waves of time, I put in here, because at the end of the day, what I've found is that government funding gets switched on and off. Council commitment can go up and down. The various funding bodies may have suddenly underspend or no money for the next 5 years. You just have to be patient, be ready, and when the time is right, you coordinate your action and get cracking. So to give you a brief introduction to Historic Coventry Trust, we were set up in 2011 to save the Charterhouse, which we have saved, hurrah. Pictures on the right, and we quickly developed into a more engaged partner with the city. So we are a charity, and from that are seen to be a fairly safe pair of hands with a group of local Coventry people, majority business people that are the trustees of the charity. And we developed a plan jointly with the council to look at what of the council's heritage buildings that they owned weren't actually doing anything. And at the end of the day, a lot of the buildings in Coventry had been largely forgotten. They were still basically maintained by the council, but they weren't being used and they weren't necessarily in the best condition. And they would at some point have become a liability to the council as and when maintenance works were coming forward. So there was a potential there to see if we, as the council's close partner, could take those buildings on, could raise the funding to restore them, but most fundamentally to bring them back into productive use. And by productive use, with a particular focus on what we were trying to do with the city at the time, which is to make it a visitor destination, to make it an attractive place, and to change what had up to that time been a rather negative image. So the idea of the trust is that it is, I've called it forever owner here, that we are the safe hands in perpetuity. We have, on the majority of the properties now transferred, we have a 250-year lease from the council, which gives the council the ability to step in case anything drastic happens at the trust. But the Charterhouse on the right, we are actually the freehold owner. So within that framework agreement with the council, we effectively did a list of all of the properties that could be transferred if and when we raise the money, and the vast majority of them have now been transferred. The end game with all of us is revenue sustainability. We never intended to actually operate the buildings, and we have revenue challenges at the moment resulting from having to operate the buildings, which results from partners pulling out due to COVID constraints. So we are doing doing work at the moment that we never intended, and have challenges that we're resolving to actually bring us back to revenue sustainability. Overall, invested in excess of 225 million so far into the city's heritage. So just quick, those of you that know us will know most of these buildings, but we've got the two city gates here. We've got Whitefriars Gate, which now looks much better because we've just completed a scheme with Architectural Heritage Fund money and Historic England money to restore the facade of that. We've also just done the Nonconformist Chapel externally, and the Anglican Chapel has been fully brought back into use. These two are in the Joseph Paxton design Grade 1 listed London Road Cemetery opposite the Charterhouse. we've then got the visitor accommodation I'll come on to, Draper's Hall, which is a fantastic guild hall from the 1830s of the Drapers Guild, which has now been converted into a venue for hire and is currently the home of Coventry Music Service, teaching young people in the city how to play musical instruments. And we've got the Burgess schemes in the centre right here, which I'll come on to in a second. The sort of final building, and the building next to the council house in the bottom right, you can see, is actually a restaurant that was built at the close of last century, which was gifted to us by the Alan Edward Higgs charity as part of a wider redevelopment we're planning of the land between Draper's Hall and that bar, which could include reconstructing some of Coventry's medieval buildings, Dresden style. But watch this space. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but as I've said, these things take a long time. So Burgess and Hale Street, then, just zooming straight in on that. This is our flagship national demonstrator for the High Street Heritage Action Zone, heavily supported by Historic England. It is one of the few bits of pre-war high street left in the city centre, conservation area with medieval origins. It was the main route out of the city to the north, and just at the top of the street is the Coventry Cross that Colin's been talking about, and on the opposite side of the road, which was all knocked down, is where John Thornton had his studio. So a place of immense history, but always, when I was growing up in the city, it was rough. There's dodgy nightclubs down there. There is it was very much an area of high levels of crime and antisocial behaviour, and really no planning enforcement at all. It is a conservation area jointly with the Lady Herbert's Gardens and the city gates, but because so much of it had been butchered, that planning enforcement had largely given up. So the aim was to take the whole block and regenerate it. About just over half of the properties were owned by the council and have now been transferred over to the trust. But the real challenge was to engage with those other third-party private owners to pull together a scheme. So to give you some examples of the before and after that my colleague Carol Pyre delivered, but you know, a lot of people, and never believe what you read on social media, but a lot of people said, why are you wasting money on this crap? Why don't you just knock it down? But you can just see the difference on you know, fairly average Victorian buildings, but you know, properly treated, they're now stunning. That's Hale Street going round the corner into the Burgess, which is the historic medieval street. The backs of the buildings are medieval, but they were refronted in sort of late Georgian, early Victorian times. But again, where possible, we've stripped off all the paint that was there. We had to render the bottom one because the brickwork was just too badly damaged, but replaced the majority of the shop fronts going up the street, and did a heavy control on signage, so you can see what it was like. The top one was the Sultan Kebab House, was actually a private owner, and believe it or not, I think a year before we got it off the ground, they ripped out the original windows and put in new PVC. And you know, we were surprised when they so wholeheartedly joined us in the scheme, putting in their 20% contribution towards the cost. The 80% was grant funded. But at the end of the scheme, the 3 generations of the kebab shop family were there, joyous, and actually the old guy, the grandfather, was actually in tears. He was just so pleased what had happened to his building. So sort of community stories are really quite heartwarming, I think. So moving to the area at the back of the Burgess, so the left-hand side of the plan is the Burgess, and the Hale Street wraps around the top. The back area is still pretty dire, and the place that we had always planned to do a major public realm improvement with Colin. We secured part of the HAS funding, 530,000, towards supporting that. And Colin of the council, with their various budgets, is supplementing that to produce a scheme which should be starting early in the new year. We have a little bit of the River Sherborne, the only bit in the city centre that isn't culverted, that just sort of pokes out from behind the backs of the medieval buildings. And the plan is to sort of dig it out and extend, deculvert some more of it, and extend that into a public square. Building in sustainability, working with the Environment Agency on the river, but also working with arts organisations, and particularly the university, who are running what we call the River Cultural Programme, organising a whole series of events. We've got an existing building, that weird half octagon, detached sort of in the centre of the public realm. It's a 1930s warehousey building, but the latest plan is we're going to relocate a local community arts group into there for a community arts cafe. So just flipping on and giving you an idea of what it looks like at the moment. I mean, it's bloody dire, really. This is the Octagon Knee building is on the left. There's cars parked everywhere. There's rubbish, there's bins, there's horrible rendered backs of buildings. And on the top right, there's a lovely little sketch of what the actual bit of river looks like with the backs of the medieval buildings. So the whole idea is to give the Burgess the setting that it needs, but also with the challenge of creating enough activity there that the whole space doesn't just get destroyed. So these are a bit of a zoom in on the plans at the moment. This is the the octagonal building. Half octagon is on the right, and with the opened up area of river in front. And then sort of looking back a bit, I mean, this is, you know, opening up the river here and doing something with Palmer Lane is something the Coventry Society have had on their radar, been pushing for well over 30 years. I mean, I got involved looking at it and working up schemes for this as a private developer 20 years ago. And we, with my private hat on, put together a student housing development on land where buildings had been demolished by the council as part of their Millennium Project. And within that, I built in cross subsidies so that we started to build a pot of funding for the public realm work. So we had £280,000 that was effectively Section 106 money that was allocated to the public realm that the council have held ever since. And also I did some machinations so that we've actually burped out £150,000 contribution to the trust as unrestricted donation as part of it, with a bit of clever stuff. And then the kind of final element of this is we've got then a few bits of land where previous buildings have been demolished that also came over with the trust, and where we're planning bits of infill development that will help create that activity in that rear area. So moving on, and very close by are the two city gates, where we have restored both of them with Heritage Fund, and also support, a large amount of support from a pot the council put together as part of the City of Culture. And the aim of this was not just to bring them back into use, but was to create something exceptional. And I think my advice is, if you can't do it well, don't do it. You know, we are trying to change the image of a city here, and we are trying to attract people to come and stay in Coventry who wouldn't necessarily stay normally. So this was targeted at the top end market, the sort of national trust type property, and fitted out accordingly. And they are just beautiful. The gates inside now with rain screen showers, sort of flat floor, wet rooms, and really beautiful oak kitchen cabinets and stone worktops. So well worth staying in if you come to Coventry. But the gates and the wall form part of Lady Herbert's garden, key part of the conservation area, which itself had gone downhill. Council were maintaining it and not doing a bad job of that. But generally, the only people that went in there were people with substance abuse issues, and there was drug dealing outside. We pulled together an activity program as part of the lottery funding and involved a lot of volunteers. So we had a lot of events. It's amazing how the odd garden party and tea party recapture the space for the community, I guess. But with the volunteers doing quite a lot of supplementary maintenance and planting to the council, which has made quite a big difference. We have I had a meeting earlier this week with a developer who wants to do a huge block of flats just to the right of the Cook Street gate, just off the right of the top right picture, who is I don't think he's going to get planning consent, but he approached the trust as a partner to look at how he could be benefiting the community, and has said to get consent and they'll fund a major extension to Lady Herbert's garden, effectively creating a major park on land that's really just space left over when the ring road was constructed. So the other visitor accommodation, Priory Row, and I put this in particularly because it links so well up with council public realm schemes. I mean, the buildings top right overlook Lady Godiva's original cathedral ruins that were the only cathedral in the UK demolished during the dissolution, and they were part of an earlier project, so the council's Millennium Project, and in about I think 2006 to create walking routes through the middle of that site. And now finally we have brought these timber frame buildings back into use. We've again, similarly to the gates, gone for sort of top end accommodation, and we've got 4 units there, ranging from a studio up to a 3-bed, 3-bathroom, 3-story cottage. The central picture is to pick up on what I've said before is most important. You need to get your key councillors on board. You need their friendship as well as their support. And here we have George with the white hair in the middle and the white shirt, who's the leader of the council. We've got Jim O'Boyle to the left, who's our major champion, who's our cabinet member for jobs and regeneration, I don't know what it's called these days. And David Welsh on the right, who's our cabinet member for heritage planning and housing, and Pat Heatherton, who's Colin's cabinet member for city services, highways. So we have the core group of councillors fully behind us. And on the bottom left picture, the Priory Row cottages are the timber frame buildings, so you can see how we fit totally into that public realm scheme. So just leaving the trust now and just going to my day job, just to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing with later and modern heritage, and picking up on what Colin was talking about celebrating our 20th century heritage. We acquired with the council and restored the former Telegraph newspaper offices, now a 4-star boutique hotel, and we kept all of the interior features of this 1950s building, which is now the city centre's premier hotel, as you can see from here. And the whole idea is to have a bit of fun doing it, and we had lots of fun. And just to prove it, this is today. If you want to stay in Coventry tonight, the first two things that come up are the historic houses where they're sold out at 8.9 fabulous, and the Telegraph Hotel at 9 score with a discount. I'll have to have a word with them about that. Then directly opposite the Burgess as CDP, and there's complementary development. You look at the top right, there's again a site of demolished buildings with a bit of temporary landscaping on it, a hideous view of high-rise student in the background. And we acquired this site, and jointly with the council have put together a scheme for 40 flats with retail uses at ground floor, which effectively stitches back the street and blocks the view of the tower blocks. Quite interestingly, I would have made the building a story lower, and the council's urban design requested that we push it up a level. And then finally, just the other stuff I've been working on, and close to the Telegraph Hotel, just going out to the ring road, picking up on Collins breaching the ring road. We had a horrid walkthrough under the ring road to top left to bottom left, the 5.5-acre disused gasworks site that had been sitting empty for many years. My company acquired it, and working with the council and combined authority, we have done a transformative scheme, the first phase of which was to put in a park. So we put a park in before the development, and we punched through under the ring road, creating a wide walkway with climbing wall, public art, nicely lit and planted, that now links all the way through past David Tittle's house to Norsmill Park, the central picture on the top. And finally, a picture of the Abbots Lane development, the 690 flats that's going to get built on that site. The more people you have living in a place, the more animated it becomes, and that sort of linear park feature then turns into fingers of green and high quality public realm that run throughout the scheme. So I've waffled on a bit too much, but just finishing off quickly. First thing I have to say to people is have fun doing it and make friends. You know, the heritage sector quite often, well, many sectors actually, can be a lot of people that just complain all the time. And at the end of the day, who likes working with somebody that's grumpy? So have a lot of fun, and have a lot of fun with your partners. Council is supreme, and remember, it's not one person. The council is many people working together, and the more people you know, the better. So don't just feel that because you're not getting a particularly positive response from one person, that is necessarily the council's position. Also, get out of your heritage silo, really. We can tend to be very focused on just our building and just our particular issue, because that is our passion. But you're far more powerful if you can bring in multiple partners to do collective action. Takes forever, I've already mentioned that. All developers aren't monsters, and what we don't do as an industry is harness, you know, the people like me in the private sector who have a huge amount of expertise in how to make projects and finances work. And also, it's important to harness the match funding that goes into those schemes. Never forget also that it's all about politics at the end of the day, and politicians love having their photos taken. The whole community engages with the urban centre, so it's always going to be high profile, and use it. And then I put it involve the unusual, just think outside the box. I mean, we've been working with the local refugee council, for example, on Lady Herbert's garden, you know, working with people that work with people with substance abuses. You don't see people with difficult life situations as necessarily a problem. They can also be your partners. And at the end of the day, don't forget your funders, which I nearly did, so I put all their logos on. But the photograph on the right, I just thought, in terms of reinforcing my point about it all being about fun. This is Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, when he came to the Telegraph Hotel, where we had fun in the ladies' toilets. Sounds a bit odd, but I just went mad and just said, it's 50s, let's make it all pink and totally over the top. And I got my dear husband to do a drawing of Barbara Cartland to make it even more tacky. And as you can see, Oliver loved it. That's all from me.
Wonderful. What a lovely thing to end on. And yes, Bethan actually put in the chat box before you answer that question, what is the picture of the man with the Barbara Cartland picture? So you answered that perfectly, Ian, just in time for Bethan. So wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you. It's actually clear to see how much passion you have for Coventry, and I know obviously you name drop the CEO David Tittle there, Ian, but he does as well. You know, he's from Coventry. He clearly loves the city, and that clearly shows with both of you as well. And to think what, you know, people can achieve between them if they work together, then it makes such a big difference. And I suppose it's quite nice for you to look back at those photos, especially the before and after, to see how far you come. Do you do that quite regularly, or is this kind of something nice that you kind of see every so often?
I think we're all too busy, aren't we, Colin? There's so much to do that we don't get time to look back.
Yeah. So these things are nice to see, because, you know, you can actually see the difference that you physically make, and it's clearly brought a lot of passion to the city as well, and to get a lot of different people involved. So brilliant. We haven't got any questions in the chat, because I think everybody was literally just focused on the pictures and you guys talking. So is there anybody on here that would like to make any comments or any questions at all to either Ian or Colin? Is anybody going to come forward first and foremost? I have got a question anyway, if not. We did have a comment from David in the chat at the beginning saying, I visited Coventry in the summer for the first time in 20 years and was extremely impressed with how the city centre looked and functioned. So well done. Brilliant. So my question is for Ian. Obviously, you know, you are a commercial developer first and foremost. So how do you feel that the interaction with the local authority was different in terms of you being a commercial developer in comparison to how it was when you set up the Historic Coventry Trust?
Oh, heavens. That's a difficult one to answer, because
what with Colin on, you mean?
no, just generally, I think, you know, as I've said before, it's all about people, and I am the same person, and you know, you have to. I have very clear dividing lines. Because I can be having the same conversation with Colin as a private developer as I can be as the trust, and it's, you know, it's the same sort of business. So actually, me being there and being such a close partner with the council that I was already, I think helped a lot with founding the trust. But it does. It does mean that it's very easy to have conversations, and you know, I can throw both into a meeting, but it's always like, right, taking that hat off and putting this hat on now. So it seems to work okay.
Yeah. And I know obviously there will be some people on here from local authorities, or there will be people who are attempting to kind of approach local authorities. Colin, how would you recommend people go about it to approach their local authorities? Because not everyone has the same mindset as you guys, clearly.
No, and I mean, I guess it does depend on you know, the local authority. As Ian says, you know, councils comprise many different people, but I think, you know, you will find, you know, like anywhere, you'll find all sorts within a council. I think, first of all, you've got to locate the right person. You've got to make sure, you know, you do find somebody who's of that mindset and who wants success to happen. And it was interesting when Ian was answering your question, you know, how does he find the local authority? Well, I can say from the other side of the fence, if it's the right scheme for the city, I would approach it with the same mindset, you know, which is we want to make it happen. And as long as it is the right scheme for the city, then, you know, I'm quite agnostic as to, you know, who's behind it. It's more about let's do what's right for Coventry. And I think, you know, anybody approaching the local authority, you know, it's got to be, you know, if you demonstrate passion, enthusiasm, maybe find the best cabinet members to, you know, to make friends with. I mean, you know, Ian was right to stress that getting the councillors on board is critical. Again, councillors are a huge mixed bag. There are some, frankly, you know, where it wouldn't be worth the while doing it, but there are some with whom it's very much worthwhile investing time and energy. And it just takes a little bit of research to ascertain who's who in the council and who, you know, to get in with.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Can I just add something to what I said earlier? I think the answer to your question is there is no difference, because as a developer, my whole career has been working in partnership with the public sector and with public grants. I've chosen to do urban regeneration in partnership. So I would never be in a position where I was going against the council and fighting against the council in my private job. If I was, it would be impossible for me to be chairman of the trust.
And I think you summed it up perfectly on one of your slides where you put relationships aren't built in a day.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, be patient with it all. So wonderful. Thank you both. Well, since I've been muttering on to you, we've had some more questions. So Heather asks, Colin touched very briefly on the nighttime economy and lighting. Would he be happy to talk a little more about this? Does this feature in their public realm discussions, and what response do they get?
Yeah, I mean, lighting is just one element of it. So, you know, that was about sort of trying to animate the space at night. But of course, it's far more, the nighttime economy is far more about, you know, what facilities have you got? So when we pedestrianised the main square in the city, Broadgate, where Lady Godiva is, that famously resulted in investment going into a somewhat redundant late 80s shopping centre and converted it into a set of bars and restaurants. So that started to kickstart the nighttime economy. We've done a huge amount of work with police and the counter-terrorism unit, looking at how do we make the city a safe place. And that obviously lighting is a key part of that. I mean, that I'm talking about functional lighting now as well as the architectural lighting. And one of the things that we're doing is working towards purple flag status to try and, you know, promote Coventry as a place that's safe to use at night, and as well as being a desirable place. So, you know, it's very much about looking at a whole, you know, again, it's not one thing on its own is going to be the panacea. This is about, you know, looking at a collection of actions, working with sort of partners in the private sector and, you know, the third sector to make sure that, you know, we create a city that's safe and that, you know, people find attractive at night.
Sorry, I've just realised I was muted. Thank you, Colin. Hopefully that answers your question, Heather. I must admit, those multicoloured lights are beautiful. They really make a big difference, don't they? David asks, what challenges have you faced with engaging with and getting buy-in from private building owners, especially absentee landlords?
I can answer that on the Burgess. We didn't get everybody in to sign up. We got all but two. The little one that should have easily been done was owned by a lady who lived in Canada, who became impossible. She was just wouldn't engage, just wasn't interested. The other one is the only derelict building we have in the shop front in the street frontage, which is owned by somebody that's clearly not interested in getting involved and engaging, and the council has taken enforcement action. So the confidence in us upgrading the rest of the street has now given the council a firm baseline that it can now take enforcement action to those that won't engage. So yeah, not everybody gets involved, but the vast majority.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, I know some towns and set cities have struggled obviously with the owners of the building, and that the Canada one is probably a prime example of that. Not everybody lives in the city where they own the building, so that can always be a barrier.
The other thing on that, and I didn't go into a huge amount of detail, is you have to make it easy. What a lot of the grant regimes have done in the past, and I've done similar things before in Far Gosford Street, but is to end up with, you know, really quite onerous grant conditions, and the grants are given direct to the owners. What we managed to, as a pilot, as a demonstrator, we managed to get Historic England to pretty much rip up the rules. And we managed to get far more flexible and easily signable agreements. And the trust did all of the work to their buildings. So we didn't actually give grants to owners. The grants all came to the trust, and the trust did the work even on the private buildings. And by doing that, it made it very easy for them to join in, because they didn't have to do anything really. They just had to sign and give us 20%. And we actually phased the money depending on the business, on whether they could actually afford to pay us in one go, or whether they would phase it over. So I think rather than, you know, having the rules that you impose on people, actually listening to people as individuals and working with them and calming their concerns. You know, a lot of our owners would not have English as a first language, for example, and you give them a large, complicated legal agreement, and it scares the hell out of them.
Fabulous. Thank you. That's some really good advice there, Ian. So hopefully that will help a few people on the call today. Next question is from Jenna. How did City of Culture figure in the programme, securing and reality, also potential legacy?
Well, I start on that one, Ian. You know, City of Culture was clearly an important point. I mean, we got a lot of funding to do work in the city centre prior to City of Culture, but clearly ensuring that we were going to have a legacy from City of Culture, and moreover, to make Coventry an attractive place to visit. So, you know, the old adage of being sent to Coventry rather than having somewhat negative overtones, you know, we wanted that to be a real positive. So, yeah, I mean, City of Culture was key. The use of local artists was absolutely crucial in that as well. You know, that we wanted to make sure that we had a legacy, and it was a damn good job we did, to be honest, because with COVID, you know, we were very much stymied as to what we can actually do. You know, a lot of stuff ended up online. The City of Culture year ended up getting pushed partly into 2022. But to be honest, it ended up itself, you know, the event itself was a little bit of a shadow of what it could have been. And so it turned out that the work we did on public realm, bringing local artists in to, you know, enhance the improvements and, you know, form a centerpiece, actually is probably our main legacy from that period. It's the one thing we can all point to and say, you know, this is the difference we made. Certainly, it was key to helping to unlock that more recent funding.
And did you want to add anything to that?
To reinforce that, really, I mean, the council pulled together a pot of funding from the LEP and the Arts Council, and from the council's own core funding, to which supported a number of the heritage projects as well, but also other cultural projects in the city, like the theatres, for example. That was a key legacy item, I think, along with the public realm. Otherwise, it created an enormous focus. It brought everybody together around City of Culture and created an enormous focus on not just the city centre, but the whole city. And I do think it was a major step forward in changing the city's image, but also in terms of the research that was done. You know, Coventry is incredibly well located. I think it's half the UK's population, or England's population, is within a 2-hour travel time. But the vast majority of people, people thought well, Coventry was a dump. Most people didn't know anything about it. They knew it had been bombed in the war, and then it had a cathedral. And some of them knew that Jaguar Land Rover were based there. But apart from that, the majority of people had never been and never seen it. And I think to have had all this work done, particularly on the public realm, but also on our heritage and things like the hotel, to have all those things done when all these people that have never been come to the city is great, because, you know, you want to polish yourself up before you go out for a date.
And that was the City of Culture, was it? Your date for the
It was.
for the year,
that date with the UK.
I like that analogy. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Jenna asks, do you have policies that enable public art commission and public realm improvements?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's almost, I'd like to say yes. I mean, I'd love to be able to say yes. Then there is a public arts policy, but you know, that's very much under review at the moment. And what I would say is that I referenced, you know, work we're doing on city visioning. This is all going to be part of our current local plan review. And, you know, I think the challenge for us there is to come up with a more coherent strategy, to be honest. So, you know, we've been very lucky, I think, in terms of being able to land various blocks of funding throughout the last decade or so. And, you know, I'm very keen that we actually tie this together into a more coherent strategy, which will enable us to access, I think, more in the way of developer contributions going forward, because that's always been a slightly moot point. You know, I think in the past, Coventry has been one of those places where, you know, I wouldn't say it was development at any price, but you know, it's like we don't want to put too many barriers in the way of encouraging people to invest in our city. But I think the more attractive a place becomes, you know, the more we can actually start to say, well, you know, this is what we think we should have, and start, you know, to make requests to developers and say, look, this is in our mutual interest. You know, and Ian's already sort of referenced examples of where, you know, we can use that as leverage. You know, he talked about the proposed block of flats near Cook Street Gate and the fact that we've got a developer there willing to look at how they can contribute towards enhancing the public realm. So I think it becomes self-fulfilling. But my answer is very much, I hope through the local plan review, we can have a much more refined and you know, coherent strategy. But having said that, as I say, there has always been a public arts policy, and there's been like public arts gateway group. It's not my personal area of expertise, to be honest, but you know, there has been a group set up in the council that sort of reviews commission to make sure that what's going out is appropriate.
Fabulous. Thank you, Colin. Hopefully that answers your question, Jenna. Brilliant.
Do you want me? I'll just say a quick word on that. I think
Please.
within the projects that we do, I think even as a private developer, I think we see public art as a key element of the project, and I think it's very important to create the place, and creating the place makes it a better building from our point of view. So I think there is an economic argument for doing it in any event, but we included a lot of public art within the linear park, for example. I think strategies and policies are really, really important to get third parties involved. I think and just having conversations with the combined authority about putting their strategies and policies in place for how to support heritage and everything. But I think as a society, we can, if we're not careful, we can get over strategized, and if I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't read half of them, because I would actually spend my whole professional life just reading everybody's strategy if I'm not careful. So it's not it's a necessary thing to get people to do things that they're reluctant to do, but it's not a substitute for getting on with it.
I like that. Yeah, agreed. It's sometimes a fine line, can't it be, as well? You concentrate on actually writing about it, but then actually being able to put it into action is a very, very different thing. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Bethan has written, just my observation, I could be wrong. She loves the Coventry Council logo, the silhouette of Godiva and the horse, but apart from the mention of the demolished Godiva Cathedral, there doesn't seem much focus on her as a historical character and her linkage to Coventry. Thinking about the development you did on Coventry Cross, or was this not shown on the slide? So is there any other elements within the city that kind of concentrates on that?
Oh, I mean, there's two schools of thoughts in the city on this. I mean, clearly she probably is one of our most famous icons. But equally, there are people who feel that you can overdo it, you know, going on looking at always at Lady Godiva because she's the thing that's most mentioned with the city. And I think we want to develop our narrative because I think it's a lot broader than that. I mean, you know, there are, reminders all the way around the city about Lady Godiva. You know, her statue sits the most prominent thing in sort of Broadgate Square. You know, in the naming of places, you know, she features. But I would say, you know, that there are many other things that we feel that, you know, are relevant to Coventry's narrative. I mean, I touched on innovation. We've always been a city, a hotbed of innovation and creativity. And that's something that perhaps is not always properly understood. Perhaps more people know us about, you know, peace and reconciliation, which, you know, again, is a key part of, the city's DNA. you know, and then famously things like two-tone, you know, that I think sort of come out of that theme as well. I think, you know, there's a danger of becoming literally a one-horse city. And I think it's far, you know, Coventry's far more about that. Yes, Lady Godiva was really important, and we did do some of the artwork we did elsewhere in the city. Certainly had reference to her as well, you know. So she's certainly not forgotten. If anybody's worried that we might forget her.
And we have a perpetual Lady Godiva, who is the person who actually has a women's group called the Godiva Sisters, and she has different Godivas, so and they do lots of good work in the city as well. So there is a kind of a Godiva groupies.
Oh, just worth mentioning as well, of course, we've got the 20-foot high puppet model of Lady Godiva that actually can be made to move.
Yeah.
And people may remember back in 2012, we cycled, and I say we because I was part of the team that did this. We literally cycled her to London on a trailer, 33 tricycles grouped together. It was comical. Pulled this 5-ton Lady Godiva all the way down to London as part of the Olympics. And that 20-foot sort of model occasionally comes out on display. We have an annual Godiva Festival in the War Memorial Park, which Lady Godiva put an appearance in this year. You know, the arts Imagineer, the arts people behind it, oh, there, I shared it. Brilliant. The arts people behind it are now proposing to build a house for it in the city centre near the cathedral and university. And Lady Godiva, that you can see there in all the splendidness, will become a permanent display, and then will come out and literally walk around the city on occasions. So yeah, I think it's true to say Lady G is not forgotten.
No, she's certainly not, and she's a 20-foot one, so she can't be. That is incredible. That is absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, Ian, for sharing that screen. I was going to try and find a news article for it, but yeah, God, I bet that was an interesting journey for you, Colin. Definitely getting down to London with that.
It was knackering.
I bet. Wonderful. Thank you both. Jacqueline is from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and she asks, what challenges are there with incorporating environmental sustainability with regard to lighting and light pollution, etc.? For example, this is always something that they consider when they fund projects.
Oh, absolutely. And my job title now actually includes sustainability. So I've acquired the sustainability team. So key to my heart. So for instance, one of the unfinished bits of the city centre work, which we're working on, we're installing rooftop solar. So we make sure that all of the lighting, all of the fountains, and all of the features in the city centre are going to be solar powered. So that's one piece of work which is currently underway. We use, as I mentioned, Balfour Beatty. We employ their lighting architects. And one of the key issues is to make sure that light pollution is minimised. The lights, of course, are LEDs, and you know, looking at how we minimise it, the hours of operation of the lights are all mega important considerations for us. And one thing I didn't mention is that the colours of most of those lights can all be changed. There's a myriad of colours, and we light the city up different colours depending on, you know, what the event is. You know, whether it's Armistice Day, you know, it might be, I don't know, Breast Cancer Awareness Day or whatever. You know, where there's a distinct colour, we'll actually relight various features of the city in those colours. So I found the lighting thing incredibly interesting, but the sustainability aspect of it is something that's certainly very close to us. And we said there's no way in all consciousness with a climate change emergency we could go sticking in all these lights if we're not going to find a way of powering them sustainably.
And you're quite involved in the city's Green Futures strategy as well, aren't you, Colin? So it kind of all interlinks together, really, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Ian, did you want to add anything to that from Colin? Nope. Wonderful. We're getting towards the end of the questions now. Right, going back to yourself, Ian, when you spoke about the trust taking on the procurement side of things for shop owners. Doing the work is a great idea, is what David said, but did this provide any procurement challenges for you guys?
No, not at all. We went out to tender as normal. So, you know, as long as things are tendered properly in accordance with the rules, you don't have any problems. So we effectively we were the conduit body that delivered it. We were the client under those construction projects, so there was, you know, I guess a potential risk that we'd get sued by one of the building owners if something went wrong, but we didn't perceive that as a great risk, and nothing's happened, thankfully. But otherwise, no, it was fine.
So no horror stories then to put David off.
No, not at all. No.
Good.
You need a really good project manager, is my advice, and we had a great guy who's just really on it on site, and good local contractors, and we picked 2 local contractors who were excellent, and one of them, you know, a good news story really. One of them I know from the old days of doing up Far Gosford Street, who, you know, probably I wouldn't have said was the best to begin with, and you know, got really interested in heritage in Far Gosford Street, and now has produced the most beautiful shop fronts. You know, it does the best work from actually somebody that you would expect wouldn't. So it is great to take people on the journey with you and develop the local skills. I think that's a key part of what we need to do.
Brilliant. Great advice there, keeping it local. Yeah, it's nice that, and then you've got a face to the name, and you know they're just around the corner in some respects. So wonderful. Right, there's no more questions in the chat box, so I will just let anybody with who doesn't particularly like typing them in the chat box. Is there anybody who would like to unmute themselves at all, just to ask Ian and Colin before we wrap up for this afternoon? Is there anybody coming forward? No, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, both of you. Colin especially. Colin is actually on annual leave this week, so he's given us a bit of his time to come on today. So Colin, hugely thank you. You know, thank you very much for coming on. And Ian, we know how busy you are, so we really do appreciate the fact that you guys could come along and share your partnership and how you work together, and the amazing transformation that you've clearly made together and with other people in the city centre of Coventry. So thank you very much for doing that today. Thank you everybody for joining us again, and we will send you through a feedback form and a link to book the other talks if you haven't booked a series ticket. The next talk is next Thursday at 2 o'clock with Chris Wade, which is Plans and Policies Partnership. So obviously we've talked a bit today already about policy, so if you are interested in that area, please join us for Chris Wade's talk next Thursday, again online. Yeah, so thank you very much everybody. Thank you Bev for all the technical support as always, and if you've got any questions about the Heritage Trust Network, please do not hesitate to contact any of the team. We would love to hear from you. Thank you again, Ian and Colin. Yes, Ian, yes, go for it.
Can I just say, you know, thank you to you all, and thank you to you all for listening, and to everybody, if you haven't been to Coventry, you've missed out. You need to get here.
Yes, definitely agreed. Colin seconding that.